Welcome to episode 10 of Sullivan Street Accounting Crows podcast, where today, on the anniversary of recovering the satellites, October 15th, we are going to get into a deep dive, song ranking, etc., history behind what some critics and a lot of fans think is their best album, Recovering the Satellites. But first, let's talk to my co-host, Chris Miggs. Chris, good afternoon. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. I'm excited to talk about this record. It's interesting to go back to this record all the way through, in part because the band tends to focus on certain songs. So there's some songs I hear very regularly, other songs I don't hear as much, especially as someone who likes to listen to live recordings. So it's kind of interesting, and it's we'll get into it as we talk about it. It's interesting to sort of compare those songs that are more commonly heard, one of which is, I think, by this point, the most played song ever live, versus some other songs that have been played, 2 or 3 times. So it's an interesting, it's an interesting kind of an interesting, as opposed to August, right? Which is much more, obviously there's some that get played more than others, but pretty much all of that is a common part of the canon. So it's kind of a different vibe, I think, than that. So very excited to get to it, and very excited to have our guest with us today.
Yes, we have 3 guests today to help us sort through Recovering the Satellites. First, we will say hello to someone who I think will be a regular in Sullivan Street, Counting Crows resident historian, Geoff Harkness. Geoff, good afternoon.
Hello and welcome, everyone. How's it going? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Very excited to be here. Love this album. It's going to be really fun to talk about. I think that if you're a big Counting Crows fan, there's at least some point at which Recovering the Satellites is your favorite album, where you're like, this is the one. I know for me, for a long time, I ranked it as my very favorite album by them. So I'm excited to talk about it. It's been really fun to re-listen to it. And also to rank the songs was very fun too. I can't wait to see what everybody came up with.
Absolutely. And for our other 2 guests today, both new to the program. One of them, I'll first say hi to Zephry. Now, Zephry, I just met recently, maybe a month or so ago, outside of the YouTube theater, and where I kind of hunted him down, where he looked like a hardcore Counting Crows fan, and I was right. And we really got along, so I thought, hey, you might be a good guest on the show, and glad to see you here. So, Zephry, hello.
Hello, Eric and Chris and Jeff and other Eric.
And other Eric. So we'll get into the album in a bit, but please tell us how you became a big Counting Crows fan and what keeps you coming back. And as I mentioned in the pre-show, you are a few decades younger than us. You're in your 20s, I have to say, which makes your story a little more interesting, I think, about how you became a Crows head.
Yeah, well, I'm actually not even as old as this album. So I'm 26. So... But yeah, I mean.
Oh, great! I'm out of here.
No, I don't know what it is. I mean, there's a couple bands for me that we all have a couple bands that we just absolutely love everything about. For me, it's Rush and Counting Crows, and most people are just like, "What? Those are so different. How could you like them?" But I just do. They're the best. So with Counting Crows,
how did it actually?
Yeah. So with Counting Crows, being a younger fan, I would say, my parents always had the radio on in the car, and Counting Crows was one of those bands that even if I didn't know the song, when I heard Adam's voice, I knew like Mr. Jones and maybe Rain King, but I hear Adam's voice and I would just go, this is Counting Crows. I didn't even know the song, and I'd look at the radio and be like, yep, that's Counting Crows. And he had that voice that just drew me right in, and his voice was so captivating, and it was like he was whispering in my ear or something, and everything he sings about is just so true and personal to him, but I think it also resonates with other people. And so there was something about that, and then of course just how great the band is and how great their songs are, but there was something about that genuine honesty that just drew me right into this band. And I would say my first introduction to them was probably Shrek 2 back in 2004, whenever that movie came out, with Accidentally in Love. That song it's still one of my favorite Counting Crows songs, because it's it's kind of different for them. It's extremely positive and upbeat, where some of their songs are not. But I think that's what always drew me to them. And then it wasn't till about 2014, which was about the Somewhere Under Wonderland era, that I really dove in when I started. I would have been my senior year of high school was that year, and I started to dive into them throughout the next couple of years, and went down the rabbit hole, so to speak. But it started with Shrek 2 because I was
great
young kid when that movie came out.
No. Yeah, I had always heard that some fans did get into them because of that song and went down the rabbit hole. But you're the first person I actually met because due to that. We'll move on just in the sake of time.
I'll say, Eric, though, it's interesting though that because I think we've all talked about sort of our paths with the band, and I do think there is something about reaching a certain point in your life where these songs start to make sense. So,
yes.
Like I feel like I became a bigger fan when I was 18, and Eric when he was, it's like it's just different times when we turned 18 or 19 or 20. You know what I mean? So, and there is something to that, and it's interesting to hear that as a theme.
Just out of curiosity, which do you know which album you purchased first?
I think it was Films About Ghosts, because that's usually what I do when I get into a band. I'm like, all right, I got to check out the greatest hits.
Okay, then after that, I guess, which of the non-greatest hits album do you know?
It was either the Heineken Music Hall Amsterdam show or Somewhere Under Wonderland.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting to me, right? Of like having some... that to have listened maybe to Somewhere in the Wonderland. I mean, owning that first before August. So interesting. Mm-hmm. We'll go to our fifth person on the podcast today, Eric Redding, or I guess I'll call you Florida Eric. Florida Eric, what got you into the Crowes? What keeps you coming back?
Basically, I've always been a big music person. I grew up listening to music. My dad had one of those old school record players with big towers back in the 80s, whatever. And, and I started getting into, it was right at the end of like the 80s, early 90s when rock was dying out, like the hair bands. And I was into Mr. Big and Extreme. And I played a little with my dad on the way he dropped me off at school. He's like, hey, you like this rock? Check out the greats and check out, Beatles, Rubber Soul and Jimmy's Are You Experienced and stuff like that. And I would listen to that just hours listening. So I've always been a big music fan. And as the 90s crept in, as we crept into the 90s, I liked the heavier bands, some like Pearl Jam or Alice in Chains. I love the grunge scene. And all of a sudden I'm driving one day and I hear, I think it was Mr. Jones down here in South Florida came out first, I think. I'm like, oh my God, listen to him emote and Adam's voice and the lyrics just really, really touched me. And here's a guy that him and I have a lot in common. I too dated Courtney Cox and Jennifer Aniston. I know how it feels, But no, seriously, I could just identify with them when the mental health struggles sometimes or relationship struggles. And like I said, the voice and the lyrics and, here's being a music fan, here's a band that sounds like, to me, Van Morrison, R.E.M., the band, and, all mixed into one. I'm like, man, that's just a unique sound from, Alice in Chains or Pearl Jam that I was used to. And I stuck with them ever since. And I grabbed August was my first album, grabbed August. And ever since then, I just went in order. And I've been sticking with them ever since. Just Eric and I talked a while back, before I went on the pod, and just the lyrics and the depth that it just grabbed a hold of me, unlike any other band, and I'm just stuck with them, and I think the world of them.
All right, great, fantastic. Nice. I do want to get into the history. I also want to mention or ask people when did they buy. Maybe I'll ask though Geoff to first talk a little bit about the unique recording of Recovering the Satellites, and of course being the sophomore effort. And I guess that's what a lot of the album is about, of trying to record after your first album was such a major hit. Was it 7 million in the US, I think. August sold, one of the most recognizable lead singers at that time. And and then all of a sudden they try to do it again. So Geoff, your take or some interesting history notes.
Sure.
Which, by the way, you can find some of these notes in Rain King, The Life and Music of Adam Duritz and Counting Crows, available on Amazon, which, by the way, Kindle, hardcover, and paperback, right?
Oh, and audiobook should be out by the end of the month. So look for that. It's 6 hours of me talking. My wife is very excited. So she calls it Tuesday. So anyway, Yeah, I mean, to me, this is one of their most interesting albums. The story of this album is insane. You could make a documentary about it. In fact, I think that's exactly what they're doing with HBO. So that's very exciting, and I can see why. This album. I mean, first of all, you've got the second album. I'm a big fan of second albums in general. I always love it when a band has a really interesting debut, and then they have to follow it with something. And that often it produces a real confidence in the group that results in in a lot of touring. In this case, that results in a very strong second album. We could talk about second albums for a long time, but I think in this case, Adam did, one thing is that some of the songs were really road tested in advance. So you have songs like Children in Bloom, which was around almost from the very beginning of the August tour. They were playing that. Goodnight Elizabeth became a staple of that tour as well, pretty early on. And then you even had stuff like Have You Seen Me Lately, Daylight Fading, Another Horse Dreamer's Blues being played, early, prior, long before the album was released. So they had about, half the album or even more than that written before they went into the studio. They also had, sort of, the support of the record label to do something, insane. And in some ways, this is Adam's most ambitious record. He decided to write the ultimate sort of treatise on celebrity and fame. It's well-worn material, but he decided to go for it. And he conceived a double album that would be, comprised of two sides, and each side was going to have a 3 or 4 song little suite. So you have these 4 suites. All of this went away after the album was released, but it's very interesting because this is really his concept, and he was very wedded to this concept. He talked a lot about it in the early interviews surrounding the release of the album. So he had this double concept. The first side was going to be about what it was like to experience overnight celebrity from multiple angles, and side 2 was going to be about the sort of learning to deal with that and the recovering from that. And also, as he described it, the possibilities that stem from that. So he had this, grand concept, and they recorded again in a house, but this time they had a huge budget, and they rented a 13,000 square foot mansion called, I'm going to say Artemisia is the pronunciation that's on a video on their website. It could be Artemisia as an artist, and it's pronounced differently, but the video on their site says Artemisia, so we'll go with that. But this giant house, and they wanted to record there. Adam this time did not live in the house because he lived in LA, and Matt Malley did not live in the house either. So some differences there. But they got Gil Norton to produce. Gil Norton was the producer, most known for the Pixies, and a very different sound. The record company, everybody wanted them to do, September and Everything After, basically just regurgitating the first album. They wanted T-Bone Burnett to produce it again. Let's bring in the same team and recreate that magic, and get the dollars rolling in. But Adam was very steadfast in refusing to use T-Bone Burnett again. And I think that was a great artistic decision, one of the early ones. And he really fought to bring this vision to life. So the mansion itself, I mean, I'll be very interested to see if they get into this in the documentary, but they had to do all this crazy stuff to prepare the mansion. They had to soundproof it because there's all these, mansions next door and, rich people. They had to, you couldn't touch any of the walls. And so they had to erect this whole series of tents so that you couldn't touch the walls. All of these rules and restrictions, they brought in a whole team to measure the acoustics, and they built had all these custom things built to, put the amplifier boxes and all this crazy stuff. So really, I mean, they went crazy spending. And also, instead of just renting a bunch of equipment for months and months, they decided, let's just buy it. It's cheaper to just buy it. So they're buying like $10,000 microphones. And really, I mean, Gil Norton said he'd never seen so much money spent on an album, and said still to this day, it's the most extravagant album he's ever seen made. And he's done a lot of, big time albums since then. Yeah. So this was a big, grand concept. Adam was swinging for the fences with this. And I love it when an artist does that and says, I'm just going to go for it and try to make an absolute masterpiece and go for it. And so that was kind of how they entered things. At the same time, of course, he had moved to LA because his life had become untenable as this celebrity star, back in Berkeley. So it was a whole new thing, and I think an exciting time for the band to be this young, sort of fresh, hot band that everybody was looking at and waiting to hear what they were going to do next. And here they come with this album. So that's kind of how it started. Hopefully that'll get us launched, as it were.
No, that was great. Thank you. Double platinum, I think it went. So their second highest selling. I think, like I said, in the U.S., the original 7 million. It's worth saying that officially this was the time that they got a new drummer and a new guitar player. And that obviously changed the sound of the Crowes, right? And it's something that Adam has subsequently said, that he always wanted a lead rocking guitar player. They just didn't have one on the first album. Because I know some people, maybe want to go back to that more, I guess, folksy or less hard sound on the first album.
But interesting, though, right, that they're new from an album perspective, but both of them had been playing with the band. I mean, Dan Vickery joins basically right at the beginning of the August tour. And then Ben Mize had joined, it's like May of 94, where he joins and replaces Steve. Maybe it's August. May or August.
It was late, August, September, I think. Yeah. I think the last shows were September with Bowman.
Did Steve finish the tour, the August tour?
No.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so the last 3 or 4 months of the tour are bent. So he'd played with, basically just that he'd played with them already and been, I guess, playing at least some of the material.
Okay.
I didn't know he didn't finish out the tour.
Yeah. I don't think they got along at that point.
Yeah, they didn't get along. Yeah.
Right away. I guess it's worth mentioning, before we dive into the songs, I do want maybe very briefly to talk about if you remember when you bought the whole album, assuming that all of you have, and did it mean anything to you? I guess I'll just start by saying I actually in my recollection, it came out in summer of 96, so it shows you what I knew. But I think that's because I worked at, I think I said this before, I worked at Circus City at the time, which is kind of like Best Buy, but it's out of business. And I worked there in the summer of 96 before moving to New York City in September. And I guess I thought I bought the album there, but in retrospect, I guess what it was is they just had the promotional flats everywhere. So hyping me up about it. So I forget, though, if I went back and bought it, because New York's not too far from where I grew up, or if I bought it in New York. But I remember I bought it pretty quickly. It wasn't maybe the day it came out, but if it wasn't, probably maybe 2 weeks after. I just remember loving it, but it was very different. In my memory, too, I think which is weird because it's not the advent of the internet, but the internet was kind of just becoming the internet then, is I want to say they launched countingcrows.com like to coincide with the release of Recovering the Satellites. Because I kind of remember very early after buying the album because this was a big deal at the time, like they had photos on the website. And I can download those photos of Charlie playing the harmonica and put it as my wallpaper.
7 hours to download the photo.
That's funny.
Exactly.
There is actually, I think they also had like maybe the early like videos, because they certainly had like a lot of footage, which is, by the way, it's interesting. If the house looks very cool, like you can see some of the house in the videos, and I just remember it really does. You do get the impression of like they are recording in a mansion. Like I can see it like in my mind's eye, just the vibe of like, yeah, they're in a very, very nice house.
So anyway, I don't have much to say except that, like you said, it's definitely a more we'll talk about it. It's definitely a more complicated album. It's definitely than August, right? It's definitely something that what songs you like will probably change over time. Some songs take longer to grow on you. Where I guess maybe compared to August, but we'll just go in order. Chris, I'll go to you about your memories of buying the album.
So it's funny because you asked that first album question. This is definitely the first Crowes album I owned. Because I did not own August when it came. I went back and bought it just because I was young and just hadn't, I don't know, for whatever reason, hadn't acquired that one. I am pretty positive I got this one for Christmas in 1996. Based on the back of really, A Long December, just being really into that song. And definitely listened to it again. I don't know how deeply I dove into it in a lot of ways, but this was definitely my first. That was a lovely Christmas present, and I'm sure I might still have that CD somewhere. I'm not sure. I got rid of most of my CDs at a certain point. But yeah, that was
I,
number one.
and I actually, to be honest, I actually think that this might have been my first Crow CD because the August at the time I only had on tape. And I think I later went back and bought it on CD. Geoff, I'll go to you. What about you?
So I got it when it came out, and interestingly, I was a college writing for the college newspaper at the time. I was like a baby music journalist, and I think this was the first CD I ever reviewed in print. It was one of the first two. The other one was Pearl Jam, that Sometimes album. The album was Sometimes on it. No Code. And so, my initial impression, I loved August, huge fan of August. And my initial impression of this album, I was like, I didn't get it or something. I didn't dislike it, but I wasn't like, oh yeah, this is genius. I was sort of like, I didn't love it. But then a few months later, I was working in this coffee shop and somebody put on August and Everything After. And I was like, oh my God, I remembered how much I love this band. And then it made me want to go play this album, which I still had the CD. And I was like, oh my God, this album's so good. Then I kind of realized how great it was. So this album then grew on me and really became for a long time my very favorite Counting Crows album. And, so by the time Desert Life came out, I was a hardcore fan and really into it and super looking forward to that release. And I think it was this album that really, really made me a Counting Crows fan forever, because I still think it's, I don't know if it's my favorite album today, but it's a 10 out of 10 album for sure.
Zephry, what about yourself?
So this album, I think it was probably in the middle of the road where I discovered, because when I became a fan, Somewhere Under Wonderland had just come out. So I remember I was in college working at McDonald's at the time, and I used to be the closer, and I would take I had a big speaker, almost like a small PA speaker, maybe this big. And I would bring it there and Bluetooth my phone in and just drive everyone nuts. And once I started to really get into the Counting Crows, I was blasting all their bootlegs while we were closing the grill at 2 a.m. And I remember I was like, oh, okay, I was going through the discography. I haven't gotten to Satellites yet. Let's put that one on. And I remember putting that one on. And just from Catapult, I remember just turning it up. And then Angels of the Silence is next, turning it up and just turning it up and up as the album went on. And just this is amazing, because I had only heard what was on Films About Ghosts at the time, which is 2 or 3 songs off Recovering the Satellites, I think. So it was very different than their other albums, and I think it still is, but it just grabbed me right away because Adam's voice and the sincerity was there, just like August and the other albums. But man, what a rock and roll record! I mean, what musicianship! I mean, just adding Dan on guitar and just the compositions and the guitar tones, and just it just grabbed me right away. And I was like, it really solidified my entrance as a hardcore fan. Absolutely.
And you brought up something. To this day, I still get annoyed about some people that only know maybe the Crows from their singles, almost don't consider them a rock album. Well, they don't rock. They're kind of a little folksy, and with the piano. And I'm like, geez, their second album could show you how much they rock. Eric, please, Chris, you had something to add real quick.
But part of that is, though, and I'm thinking about my experience with that record, A Long December is the big single from that record, and
exactly.
It is very different than a lot of the rest of the record. I think that's one of the reasons why it took me a while with the record, was that what I loved was A Long December, and not maybe so much the first time around Catapult or, But anyway.
No, that's true. Florida Eric, your experience with Recovering the Satellites, the album.
Yeah, like I said before, I was a fan from the jump, and I was always just a music fan in general. So I remember one time I went to Specs Music down here, no longer there, but of the 90s, it was the big record store in town, and I was looking for something else. And I think I remember driving up and seeing a sign in the window, and obviously marketing wasn't big online or anything back then, but sign in the window, Counting Crows, new album, Covering the Satellites, get it here or whatever. Like, oh my God, I run in the store and I just purchased it. And I have it's complicated status with this album. I told Eric a couple weeks ago when we did the little meeting pod at, I understand why they wanted to make this album a little bit different from the first one. And I'm glad Adam told the label to stick it. But out of the first 3, it's probably my least favorite out of the 3. But with Counting Crows, I'm going to keep it G rated. It's like pizza. It's like even when it's not your favorite, it's still good. So the Crows' least favorite out of the three is better than any other band. So that's where I stand with it. But I love it. I'm ready to get start talking about it.
All right, great. Well, that being said, let's go right into the sing. I do want to say, because last time I mentioned this as we talked about the songs, but I think it's worth mentioning as we're going to rank the songs, what were the official singles? And they actually had 4 official singles. Angels of the Silences was actually the first single, which was rocking. And officially, it's funny, like, charted pretty high. The U.S. alt rock number 3 and U.S. mainstream rock number 4. Where Long December did not chart as high on the rock charts. Number 5 on the alt and number 9 on the mainstream. Now, of course, like staying power and video plays, Long December, I'm sure, was a lot higher. Neither of them, I guess, charted on the top 40. I don't think they've ever, since until Hanging Around, actually had a real top 40. Daylight Fading was an official single. I remember hearing that on the radio a couple times in New York City. Charted in the top 30 on the rock charts. And this I don't remember as much, but I kind of vaguely remember. Have You Seen Me Lately also was a single, top 40 on the rock charts in the U.S., but I didn't, and the video they didn't really play at all. Daylight Fading, I remember seeing the video a couple times, either on VH1 or whatever. So those are their 4 official singles, and we'll see how they go when we go through our rankings, which I guess we'll start right now. Here we go. 14 songs on Recovering the Satellites. We all put in our votes. No one knows each other. Lower scores are the better. I kind of found that there were 5 tiers of songs. The third tier was kind of just one song by itself, but other than that, there were 4 other tiers. So the 3 at the bottom. Let's start with number 14. So number 14, all of us had it in our kind of bottom 5, which would be Counting Crows. I'm Not Sleeping. Number 14. Anybody have some thoughts they want to share about I'm Not Sleeping, why they might have put it low? No one, actually, ironically, no one put it at their 14th, but we all had it in our bottom 5 or so.
Yeah, well, also, I'll had this, at the top of my bottom 5. So what's really cool about this song is the string arrangement, right? It's an incredibly interesting string arrangement. And that's actually one of the things I think is interesting. I found made this record very hard to rank was that there's kind of cool bits in every song. So even a song that I maybe didn't connect to, like this song, I don't feel particularly strongly about in a lot of ways. I don't really connect to it. But that string arrangement, if you've got headphones on, is really, really cool. I think it's like Paul Buckmaster, right? Who's done a crazy amount of string arrangements for records. I think some of them, like McCartney records and Elton John. And so it's a really cool song. But I also... I don't know. I also did think of this song as maybe a rejoinder to Hanging Around, because if you get to stay up very, very late, at some point that becomes not cool and it becomes insomnia. Right. And then you write sad songs about it as opposed to yearning songs about getting to stay up late.
Yeah, and I guess I kind of thought this, but it didn't really, until you were speaking, it didn't really hit me. I kind of saw this as either, I guess, a precursor to actually all of Saturday Night, Sunday Mornings. Because I think this is the one song on here that shows maybe his mental illness more than anything else. Kind of like a descent into madness, if you were, if you will. Yeah, and I also love the strings. That's my favorite part. And then they had that, and of course, a lot of it's a love part too. But Zephry, Geoff, or Eric, any thoughts?
Yeah, this was my 12th, I think. I had it 12th on the list. Yeah, I mean, the strings are phenomenal in this song. I've actually grown to like it more. I remember the first listen, I was like, ooh, I don't like this. But then the last year, I was like, this is actually a pretty cool song. Like, the dynamics are quite amazing, and I love that Dan's, like, I think it's Dan, his like swells he's doing at the verses, and the big kind of guitar solo, and then the very end where it goes up, 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 up. And I remember hearing a story of how it was recorded where it was like 4 a.m. or something, and Adam woke up the engineer and he's like, I got it. And they go down to record it, and he's like jumping up and down, and you can hear him like jumping up and down at like one point in the chorus halfway through the song. And it's a really good arrangement, the whole song. And so I think that's grown on me more over the years. And it's one of those things where there's not a bad song on this album, but there's so many just amazing songs, and I think that's the only reason why I put it at 12 and not any higher. But it has grown on me over the years for sure.
Geoff, your take?
Yeah, I think. I mean, I placed it at the lower end too, but this is an album where you're kind of splitting hairs because it's got a lot. Every song's pretty good. I think that here you have that theme of insomnia really coming to the fore, which we'll see again in songs like "Good Night L.A." So really talking about insomnia, but also this. It's at a key point in the album. It's the fourth song on the album. And, this is that part of the album where he's talking about, the crisis of fame. And there's a double meaning here. So he's not sleeping, it's really about insomnia, but it's also about, and he mentions who we think Jennifer Aniston in there, but it's also about something's like woken up in him that had been sleeping all these years. And, he's got this new life now, and there's something he can't turn off anymore. So it's a really key sort of, in terms of the theme of the album, it's a key lyrically and a key moment in the album. I also want to mention, in addition to the strings, Adam's vocal performance at the end of this song is pretty incredible. And I mean, this is an album where he really, as much as everyone praises his singing on the first album, I really think his singing on this album is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And on a song like this, he's showing it too. What he does at the end of this song is something that, is pretty incredible. So even though this didn't rank super highly on my list, I still really like the song a lot.
Eric, any final thoughts on I'm Not Sleeping?
I do too. I agree with pretty much everything you guys said. I think with Chris, I think he said it had it at 10, the top of his bottom 5. I did too, and I do too like the string arrangements. I also like the fact that it kind of goes along with the theme of I'm a star and now I got to bear the this cross to bear. You want me to play all these shows, you want me to do all these interviews, you want me to rock Messiah, but I don't know if I want that. I wanted that. I don't know if I do anymore. So it keeps them up at night, which is what the song was about. So like I said, I really love it. It's not that it's low because it's bad or anything's wrong with it, but it's just, Satellites has such great songs that I had to put it somewhere. So.
Right.
All right, thank you. All right, so here we go. Number 13. Now, this is a song that probably would have ended up in last place if it wasn't for me. I ranked it in the top 10. Nobody else did. Which would be the shortest song? Which would be the swan song, the final song, Walkaways, written, I think, by Dan, interestingly enough, which kind of surprised me. It sounds like it would be, I don't know, my guess would have been someone else, but I think Dan and Adam wrote that. I love Walkaways. I don't know. It's short, sweet, makes you want more. It's kind of I don't really have an excuse of why it's so high for me because it's such a simple song compared to everything else. But I just think it's I don't know. It's a great goodbye song. And he's kind of, I think it almost feels like it's like a fake short. It's not like a 1-minute song, right? But it almost seems like it's going to be a real song. And then he's like, you know what? Sometimes you just have to walk away. And I am.
Yeah.
Goodbye. And it makes you want more.
Yeah, I'm with you. Again, I had this, I think just below I'm Not Sleeping. So I guess that would be 11th. I also really, I was kind of surprised it ranked so low. It just kind of didn't, I was a little surprised that it didn't bump anything else, but it just kind of didn't when I was doing the rankings. I've always loved this song as an concert closer, which they've used it a lot, certainly a ton on the Recovering the Satellites tour. They then went back to it like 2008, they used this as a lot as a closer. And I think it's kind of a delightful, like little, like coda on the end. And I think they should bring that out for the rotation. Not to say it should be the one every time, but it's a good way to end the show.
Absolutely.
Zephry, your take on Walkaway?
Yeah, it's a great song. I actually did a cover of it on my YouTube channel. I'm a guitar player myself. I play in a couple of bands, and so I did a little cover of this song, and I played it at college for a little ensemble performance once. It's
at the end. Yeah, at the end of the show, please plug your YouTube, or I'll put it in the description.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's such a beautiful song. I mean, it's short, and I remember because I know they played it obviously on the Satellites tour. There's a version of them in Cape Town, South Africa, on I think it was right before the Desert Life tour. I don't think the album had come out yet. And then, like Chris mentioned, in 2008, they kind of resurrected it a bit. And I think Adam had said at one point when they were writing it, like, was talking to Dan, and he's like, should it be any longer? And they're just like, no, I think it's perfect just the way it is. And it's one of those things where I personally just think that song is just absolutely perfect the way it is. And they feature it in the VH1 recording of Recovering the Satellites, which I'm sure they'll bring back when the HBO comes out. They show them recording it, and it's just Dan and Adam down in like the basement of that big house. And like Dan's kind of got like a ISO booth or whatever because he's recording guitar, and then Adam's singing the vocals. And it's really cool to see they probably did that in just a couple of takes, like at the same time. So it's just a beautiful song, great way to close the album, great way to close a concert. I'd love for them to like alternate that with Holiday in Spain or something at the end of concerts, because I think the diehard fans would really go nuts. I know I would.
I agree. Geoff, your take.
Yeah, it is. I agree. It's such a perfect closer to this album. This is a really well sequenced album. And so like the opening with Catapult and closing with this song, you couldn't put this song anywhere else other than at the end of the album. And I love it for that reason. It also, in some ways, it reminds me a little bit of Her Majesty, which is if I'm not mistaken, it's the last song on Abbey Road. But this very short song. And again, this song's clocks in at just over 1 minute, and a lot going on. But it's I think it's a little gem. It's one of the 3 to 4 songs that's very overtly about Courtney Cox as well. So the fourth suite of the album, which is Monkey, Mercury, Long December, and Walk Aways. 3 of those 4 songs are specifically about Courtney Cox, including this one. And so the super geeks would get into like, which of the 4 suites is your favorite, and so this is right. This is part of that Courtney Cox suite for those of you, keeping track at home. And I like it for that reason too. It is a real gem for sure. I love it. And although it didn't rank highly, I think it's a great closer for the album.
Absolutely.
Eric, any thoughts?
I agree as well. I think it's a gem. The only reason I didn't rank it higher, in fact, is because it's only a minute, and you guys like it, but me, I was like, no, I want more. I was into it. I think it's fantastic, and I would have loved a 3-minute, whole song version of it, but that's the only reason I ranked it low. Not that it was bad. It's just I wanted more. But
my funny, I'll try not to give too many personal stories, but I do have interesting, I do like kind of random things for especially songs that are not like really well known, but I was like in my traveling mode and mood at the time, and I was backpacking, and let's just say at the time crashed a couple nights at some local girls or young woman, maybe, I don't know, 20, 21 maybe, at the time for a couple nights. And then things weren't going, not that they were bad, but they just weren't as good as I thought, and kind of were becoming a little bit awkward. And I think there was some, in my opinion, that she wasn't being open to some stuff and actually liked me more. And it's funny, I kind of left a day early, and it wasn't like I left and stormed out. Like, she knew I was leaving in this, but I don't know what got a hold of me. I actually left the lyrics of this, maybe somewhat passive aggressively, as I left. But what's interesting is not that I did that, but when we wrote later on email, or maybe she did it you know what? It was actually a snail mail. She actually said it made a big difference, and that she did realize, because I left these lyrics, she realized she was being a little immature and vowed to be more mature when it came to like men and dating and stuff. So who knows, right? Adam's power.
He's a poet. He's changing lives. That's interesting, though. I'm not sure I know I've left some notes with song lyrics in my life. I'm not sure if I've ever used a Crow song in that way. But that is,
and I don't
works,
know if
right?
I ever, and I don't know if I ever did more than one line. I mean, maybe on somebody, even a friend's, I might have put one line just to be funny or cute, but that's the first time I ever did something like that. So anyway, and speaking of women that are kind of hot cold, we will go to our next one, which is Mercury, if you haven't guessed. Now, I'm sorry, Chris, I say this because you hinted in an earlier podcast that you love this song. And then when I placed it last on my list, I was like, geez, Chris might break up with me as a podcast co-host. So two of you, I'll say Chris and Geoff both had it as a top 10 song. The rest had it on the lower group, but we can talk about Mercury. I always thought it was a fine song. It's definitely not a dislike, but even from listen one, and I think to now, I know a lot of Chris fans love it. And don't they have a B-side with like a 13-minute version or something? I don't know that I own. But Chris, I'll go to you.
I'll just say that is, I have this one sixth, and this is one of the songs on the record that I struggled with most, in part because I think the album version is a good song. It's an interesting song. I have it in the top half of the record. I think it's a really effective tune. The live versions with the Love and Addiction stuff in the middle, and just there's a lot of really, really cool stuff in there, and that really brings the song out, right? I think there's the song is kind of short, and I think is a little ambiguous in certain ways, and that the live version it really pulls a lot of that stuff to the forefront in a way that I think is really beautiful. I have gotten to see them. It's interesting. I've only gotten to see them play it like 2 or 3 times. The first time I ever got to see them play it, I was very, very excited. And I was with a friend of mine who was like a Crows fan, but not like a super huge Crows fan. This was at the Wellmont Theater in 2008. And Adam goes into an alt in the middle that's not the original, the main one that they played a lot. And it was basically like stick a needle in your arm and it feels like love. And my friend just looked at me like, this is the one you like? And I was like, yes, I swear it's not real. It's hard to explain. Let me go home and burn you a CD with 8 versions of this. But yeah, I really like the song, and it's great. But yeah, not the very top, but very, very cool. And if you haven't listened to a version with Love and Addiction in the middle, you should.
Zephry, your take on Mercury.
Yeah, I've actually put it at the bottom, and honestly, I think it is better live. There's a version it's on Nugs. It's from Cape Town, where on that tour is when Emmy joined the band, and I think he's playing lap steel, and that version is so cool. And Adam starts with the stick and needle, and it talks about what the song is about, girls that are so addicted to guys that are just so like toxic, these toxic relationships, and they keep coming back and stuff. So he kind of explains what the song's about, but the song just kicks in with Emmy on that lap steel, and then again I think they played it some more on some other tours or some versions on Nugs, but I think it's like one of those things where it just brings the song out more. On the album it's like, yeah, it's good, it's cool, it's different, the way it starts. I think Ben is playing like a bass drum, and Dave has like a resonator guitar or whatever, but the live version is just like, that's what got me into this song. So,
Geoff, we'll go to you. And before, am I wrong by saying that this is, I don't know, at the time, the most bluesy of the songs? Is that accurate at all? Geoff, do you take on that or no?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think the steel guitar on a slide guitar gives it that sort of tenor. Yeah, I love it. I had it as number 7, and I probably could have ranked this even higher than that. This is I just love this song a lot. I think one is that there's really nothing else on the album like it, other than it's sort of like, this is the song that Walkaways wanted to be and wasn't. Because in some ways they have those two, to me, seem very much like companion pieces, but this to me is a much more successful sort of attempt at what they were doing here. You have like something that's very experimental in some ways. It's a step away from what they normally do. And it reminds me as a kind of a precursor to songs like Le Ballet d'Or, which I think is also a really cool song. It's got that maybe it's that drum that Ben Mize is using.
Absolutely. That's the song that it reminds me of, Geoff, which I also don't love. I'll give it free. But I think those are like companion. Yeah, I think those are companion pieces. So,
yeah. And then also, I think the lyrics to this song. I mean, a lot of great lyrics. Adam Duritz writes great lyrics, but I think this is a really, really I love this lyric. A really insightful piece, and even the theme of Mercury and I don't know. I'm a big fan of this song for sure. I think it's great.
That's true. A pretty good analogy. Well, I have to say that. I'll that analogy will always be imprinted upon me. Eric, your thoughts of Mercury?
I actually had a rate 12, and in my notes, everybody talked about a great bluesy feel. That's literally what I wrote in my notes. I wasn't too familiar with this song when it first came out. In a couple of years when I spun the record, backwards and forwards, it didn't stick out to me. But it's like, as we said a million times before, it's not that bad. It's just an album of great songs. But Zephry, alluded to the theme of the song, and I was talking to Eric, like I said, to get acclimated to the pod and meet him and stuff a couple weeks ago, and I'm trying to get my 17-year-old daughter into the Crows, and she kind of likes them, and it has such a great message. I wanted her to listen to it as well, and she probably listened better if they changed the name to Taylor Swift, but that's the way it goes.
All
In
right.
due
You
time.
got to play her that version. Yeah, well, you got to play her that version of A Long December with the 1 in front of it, and she's going to be like, "Now this is good."
No, Chris, I have, and she loves it, man. She does.
Nice.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So that goes to 14, 13, 12, which what I would call clearly those were the tier 5 songs, because there was then a little space separating those from the next two. So the next two would be kind of that tier 4. I think neither of these are a surprise, actually. I bet you if I had you guess what the next two are, I bet you could get it, maybe not in order. But here we go with number 11, which is one that most of us also had in the bottom 5, although Eric had it a little higher, Florida Eric, and then we'll tell about this because I'll even start with him because Geoff inexplicably had it in the top 3. No, it's very interesting. Had it in the top 3, which is Another Horse Dreamer's Blues. So Geoff, I'll start with you just because you had it as number 3. So talk about why you love this song.
What? Oh my God! How can this not be ranked like so high? Yeah, I mean, I was wrestling whether to put this as my number 1 song on the album. I think this is one of Adam's very finest vocal performances. If ever anyone was in doubt about his ability to sing, I think this song just ends any debate or discussion there. So for that reason, I really love it. I also think that it just, again, it showcases they weren't doing this to get a hit. They were doing this because they were trying to make, wildly experimental, interesting music. And so to me, you have the strings here, you have the performance of the band, which is just, really stellar. And then you have the lyrics, which I think are cool and interesting and literate. It's based on this, play. But I think the selling point to me is Adam's vocal performance, which to me, I think this has to be his best vocal performance on this album, in my opinion, and maybe one of the best of his career. I think it's just an astonishing achievement in terms of his singing. So that's why I put it high on my list. There's my plug.
No,
Nice.
I also like the song, Geoff. In fact, in retrospect, I probably should have put it 1 or 2 spaces higher. I probably couldn't go higher than that, and I agree with you about the singing. Now, I know Chris is probably going to mention that how it's a companion piece. It really is a companion piece, right, to Marjorie, which I still don't know a ton about, but that Marjorie's dreaming of horses and stuff. So you can talk a little bit about that. I will say I don't have much else to say, but I'll look at the lyrics as we move on. But this has happened in my life where somebody who was not a Crows fan did a weird Crows reference, which was that I had a woman stay at my place once out of a couple times. And as you did in the 90s and 2000s, when you visit each other's places, you go over the CD collection, maybe the movie collection if they have one, which, by the way, young kids nowadays, college kids can't do that, right? You can't just, how do we pass the time? Well, what CDs do you have, right? I mean, what do you say? Give me your iPhone.
That's why you collect vinyl records. That's why we collect vinyl records too.
But she saw the Recovering the Satellites album, and she goes, and she said, "Oh, I don't know a lot about this, but I had an ex-boyfriend who said he always thought of me when he listened to Another Horse Dreamer's Blues." So I found that totally random, totally interesting.
That's a good
and
thing.
Chris, I'll move. Yeah,
Was she
right.
very good at gambling on horses? Like, I'm curious what
I have no
was there.
idea, but I just love when stuff like that happens, especially because of my love of the Crows. But Chris, I'll move to you for your take.
So again, it's interesting because I don't disagree with anything Geoff said. I think it's a super cool song, and I like Adam's vocals. I like a lot of the the pieces of it. Really love the sax solo. I think is really good, and actually, I think the one period where they played it live after the original record was in 2009 when they had in Michael Franti's band a sax player sort of on the road with them, and it's a very again it's super cool. Just and I think this may have indicated to me part of what I think I end up ranking these songs on when we're doing these tends to be sort of like emotional resonance. And I just don't emotionally resonate with the story of the girl who dreams of horses. It doesn't, it's cool and it just doesn't, it never hit me. So I think that's probably why it sort of falls a little bit lower, but I'm with you. It's a cool and interesting song.
Zephry, your thoughts on
Yeah, this is, I mean, again, they're all great. I had this one at 13. I like the version of Marjorie, which there's a few Nugs recordings from 94 or whatever, which I think obviously this song probably came from. But yeah, the instrumentation, the arrangement of the song, I love how it comes in with the Rhodes, which Adam plays live too on the tour. There were some videos and stuff where you could see that. And I think it was on the Desert Life tour where they had a saxophone as well instead of the organ solo in the middle, which to me I thought was not cooler, but just different. And then later when they played it in 08, I think they had the trumpet on Carriage and then the saxophone on this one as well. So for me, this song, I can't really relate to the lyrics as much as other ones, but it's incredible musically. Like Geoff, you said, Adam's vocal performance is amazing on this. And the dynamics on this song, it's one of those songs that I've shown some people that aren't Crows fans and they go, wow, that was amazing, because it's just so interesting and there's so much going on in it, and that's just what they do. And so, I think it's a beautiful song.
Florida Eric, your take.
It is a beautiful song, and it's kind of funny, guys. I think I made a grave error. I had it at number 9. I think it should be ranked higher. It just tells such a great story. As I've listened to the album over and over, it being the least favorite of the first 3, I wanted to get ready for the show, so I was listening to it over and over, and I almost, emailed Eric and said, "Hey, can I rearrange my, rankings, or whatever?" But it's just tells such a fantastic story of this girl who escapes her troubled life, through riding horses, and it's another world to her, and it's her sanctuary. And I can't relate to it personally, but I think it's just fantastic and beautifully written and performed, and it's really great. It's got a Doors-like organ to me. Raymond Zarek, played organ for the keyboard for the Doors. I think a lot of that keyboard organ sounds like him, to be honest. So I love it.
Yeah, that's a great point. It does have that kind of Doors build and climactic thing to it. The one other thing I was going to say is I never knew what this song was about. I'm like not somebody who pays that much attention to lyrics. If somebody like Adam singing, hey, I don't care, sing the phone book. But I always thought that this song was about a woman who was addicted to heroin. I thought that was the horse's heroin, and the dreaming and the sort of psychedelic music, and all of the lyrics and stuff. I always thought it was more about that, and this other part of it, I sort of read about later, but it's another one of those songs that you can sort of interpret it in different ways, and it takes on different meanings too. Anyway, I'm glad people do like it, even if it didn't rank highly on everyone's list.
All right, and now on to number 10, which for years I I'll give it away. Probably I thought it was similar in sounding to I'm Not Sleeping, but one that's kind of been slowly moving up my rankings. So 2 of you had it quite low. 2 of us had it in the middle, and Zephry had it quite high at number 5, which is one that they brought back on this tour, Children in Bloom. And I thought the latest tour version, I don't want to repeat what I said a couple episodes ago, I thought what is amazing. They added some extra parts to it. They kind of showcase each band member at some point. It's a rocker, but also kind of smooth. Anyway, I like Children in Bloom. So Chris, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I actually had this one last, and I was actually kind of surprised as I was ranking it. I almost surprised myself, because I was enjoying hearing them play the song, listening to the tapes this summer. But yeah, it just, again, one that sort of didn't hit me the same way. But a very cool song, and again, kind of an interesting history that it is one of the oldest songs on the record that they had kind of perfected probably by the time they got in the studio. Yeah, I'll leave it there. Again, I was surprised myself, but that's, again, I think it speaks to where all of us kind of felt with this record.
Yeah, it's one of their more unique songs. I'll go to Geoff, and then the other two have it a little higher. So, Geoff, your take on "Children in Bloom," or any historical notes you have about that song?
Yeah, I mean, just that same thing. I think it is the oldest song that actually made the album, and it was one of the ones that was played a lot. So when they came into the studio, they were able to, bang it out pretty quickly. I think the one thing I noted when I was re-listening to the album is, wow, Matt Malley's bass playing on this song is just tremendous. It is really, really good. And he's somebody who doesn't get very much credit, I think. But I want to give a little shout out to the bass playing, because it's a tremendous. Listen to the end of the song; he is just jamming. It's great.
It's funny. I think it was off, not on one of the podcast episodes, but when Chris and I were just talking, either before or after, or in addition, I said the exact same thing. I thought there's one of the songs on August. Now I'm forgetting. I guess it's Ghost Train or Time and Time Again. But this was the one that I thought he really stood out, and I thought that's a great part of the song. Let's go to Zephry, who had Children in Bloom in his top 5. Or no, he stepped off for a second. So, Florida Eric, you had it in the number 8. What did you think about this song?
I did, yeah. I think it's a great little song, great lyrically. I also noticed the bass playing was fantastic too, and that's an instrument you don't usually hear a lot of, stand out aside from some of the famous rock players, But like I said, I don't have anything that stands out overall. It's just a really, really solid song. So, I can't say anything bad about it.
Zephry, you had it ranked the highest, top 5, Children in Bloom. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, this song to me is just a musical journey, and I lost my mind when they started playing it. I was in the second row at the LA show. It was definitely my top 5 bucket list songs, and I never thought they'd play it, and they played it, and that was amazing. But to me, this song is it's full of everything. It's got a great start to the song with the keyboards, kind of like Round Here, and Dave's guitar riff is kind of like Round Here, and then it just kicks in super hard. And I love the melody of the vocals at the chorus, and I love there's 2 guitar solos, and I love the bass line after the solo, and I just love everything about this song. And they have played it differently over the years. In 2009 or 10, Emmy and Dan did like a guitar duel, and then this last tour, like Adam walked off the stage, and I think Emmy just kept soloing for must have been like 3 to 5 minutes. I mean, Eric, you were there. It was just incredible.
Yeah, no, it was great. And like how great for you. If this is your bucket list song, this is not one that you'd expect that they would have brought out this tour when they've been playing more greatest hits, or if maybe they're playing second tier hits, or maybe Dream of Michelangelo, something a little kind of softer. But for them to bring out Children in Bloom at this stage, what a treat for people like you that really wanted to hear it.
Oh yeah.
I agree with you. And as I said, I think Charlie maybe is understated in the album version, but in the live version, he added a bunch of extra parts to it now. And even Dave gets into it. He rocks on that, even though maybe he doesn't show it as much. But by the way, I don't know if it was for this song, but you do know that they showed you on the Jumbotron or whatever a couple times during that. And one time you got even a loud roar because there was some reaction you had. I don't know if it was to that song or not, but I don't know if you realized that. But where they actually showed you and you were really enthusiastic and people cheered a little bit. So,
oh wow,
so good for you.
All right,
that was cool.
That's cool.
Children in Bloom, number 10. So now we get into that kind of ends what I call the lower 2 tiers as far as our ranking goes. Now we've all kind of said we basically love every song on Recovering the Satellites. Now we get to what I call tier 3, but it was really just one song that stood by itself. Partly because the rankings were all over the place, but also the number 8 was clearly more favorite, and Children in Bloom was clearly not as popular. So this song, me and Chris had it in the middle, and Zephry and Eric had it a little lower, and Geoff had it number 2, part of his suite, which would be Counting Crows, Monkey, Courtney Cox. I'll go. Let's start with Geoff, just because he had it at number 2. Then I'll chime in.
Everybody hates all my choices.
No, I like it.
No, I'm kidding.
No, it's great.
So first of all, I really was strongly considering putting Monkey as number 1. It's one of my very favorite Counting Crows songs. I think it's one of the best songs on this album. I think it's unique in their catalog. I don't think that they have other songs that sound like Children in Bloom or Recovering the Satellites. Monkey to me is really a standalone song. They don't really have anything else that sounds like this in their catalog. And but that's not reason enough to love it. I think that itself is just such a great sounding song. It was, I think, the first time they really did something super unique and interesting with the backup vocals, which are going all over the place and doing something really like this kind of Beach Boys use of the backing vocals. They got into a lot more of that on like Desert Life and especially Hard Candy. You saw them drawing upon that concept a lot more, not just, doing harmonies, but doing these like interesting, intricate background vocals that are going all over the place. I just think it's the lyrics I love. I think it's a beautiful song. I think it's a beautiful tribute to, this woman that he's really in love with. And like I said, I was strongly debating whether or not to put this as my top song on the album. So to me, love it.
I guess I'll give my take. I love Monkey. In fact, I actually listed it as one of the top 5 songs, and maybe the first, right? Nothing on August, and then this is the only song on Recovering that is kind of on my, top 5 songs I'd like to hear him play live. I agree with you. Maybe I kind of think it's one of their first takes on a pop song. I agree with you actually about the backup. You actually do hear maybe a bit of early Hard Candy in it because it's kind of that Beatlesque, short and sweet, poppy. I don't know if you heard the podcast where I said, Geoff, how weird is it that this is the first Crow song, right, that references another band, which would be Ben Folds, and it's before they got 2 of the ex-Ben Folds band members in the band. And if you hear them play that live now or see them, Jim rocks the Ben Folds line, and like basically him and Miller wink and nod to each other at that part. So it's really interesting. Yeah, I like the song. It's grown to me through the years. I don't know how much will move up. I had it as number 8, surprisingly. But Chris, I'll go to you.
I had it at 9. Again, I'm with you. I love the song. I also, one of the things I really like about this song is that that reference to Monkey sort of floats its way into other songs, and it's part of the way. Because the way Adam tells these stories, it connects to different things. Obviously, most prominently, Holiday in Spain, right? But that it's just kind of I love that the way he uses that to float through other things, and it's that story, those little kind of crumbs that you can kind of piecing his own story together, especially with the way these songs were all written at different times. So that's, and again, it's a beautiful pop song, and I'm a fan.
All right, Florida Eric, go to you for Monkey.
I thought it was okay. Yeah, it does kind of lend itself to the beginnings of what's on Hard Candy. That's kind of start of, I like the first 3 albums the best, and after Hard Candy, I couldn't quite get into as much as the other ones, but I do like it. It's a beautiful song. I like the fact that a lot of the album is, him trying to deal with stardom, and it's tough to deal with and depressing, but here's a girl who might actually make life worth it. So I kind of like that angle of it as well.
Great. Zephry, your take.
Yeah, I mean, I put it at 10, but honestly, it's such a great song. It's just you're dealing with, like we keep saying, amazing songs on this album. I like what Geoff said, and this is what I think draws me to this song is not call and response, but like another melody at the chorus where I don't know who's singing it. I guess just, whoever. But there's another melody going on with the vocals under Adam's vocals at the chorus. And to me, that just drew me to this song because it's so powerful and it's so positive and it's just so catchy. I don't know. I mean, it sounds kind of cliche, but it just, to me, that's like so cool. And it definitely did, interesting, you guys said, pave the trail for a lot of the backing vocals that later showed up on Hard Candy and Saturday Nights and Sunday Mornings and stuff. And yeah, I just think it's a really fun song.
I agree.
The same way that, because it's interesting, it's not in the lyrics. What I actually am not 100% sure I know what the backing vocals are saying in the chorus.
Yeah, same.
I
Can
don't.
you
I was
sing the
looking it
pain
up,
or something?
trying to figure it out today. I was reading the lyrics, like, is this listed on the lyrics? It's not, so I don't know what they're saying. But also
Right, well,
the Charlie's
sounds great.
piano playing so good too on this one.
Always.
Yeah, if somebody can help us out with that, send us an email. What is it? SullivanStreetPC@protonmail.com. Please send us. Yeah, there's a couple songs with the backing, lyrics where I'm not always 100% what they say. So, no, good point.